why you still need to read and write. Right now, you are in a room with fewer readers than at any point in your lifetime. Fewer than half of American adults read a single book last year. Not a chapter, not a page, a whole book. The number of people who read for pleasure on any given day has been cut nearly in half since 2004. Nearly a third of adults now struggle to draw an inference from a page of text, a number that has grown fast in less than a decade. Now, none of this is by any accident, none of this is a mystery. It is a predictable result of a world built to remove the friction from our lives, one convenience at a time. So, I want to talk to you today about this friction that has been removed and that we perhaps intentionally remove, and about what happens to our minds, to our business, to our lives as citizens when this friction goes. So let's start. I am Serena. This is Serena's Playbook, but I'm also going to publish this to my commentary channels and platforms because I think it's really important. A lot of the data from this piece has been sourced from the latest Atlantic piece called The End of Reading is Here. It's an essay, and I want to ensure that I attribute it correctly. Let's scroll all the way to the top because it's quite a long piece. It's an essay, and it's by Rose Horowitz. So let's talk. Let's start with the habit itself. Reading, according to sources, is not natural. Your brain isn't necessarily built for it. It was built to read a face, to perhaps recognize a threat, perhaps notice a shadow that is moving in your space, in nature, in the grass. Every time you read a page, you're forcing this sort of ancient piece of machinery that we can call our brains to do a modern job. That forcing has a name, and it's called, I alluded to it just before in the intro, cognitive friction. A friction that is now, if done daily, is how a muscle gets built. However, it's not being built. In fact, it's being allowed to atrophy. Writing does something even harder. Writing makes you commit. A thought in your head can stay pretty half-formed, soft, unrefined. A thought on the page has to hold almost an abstract shape, if you like. It has to survive your own scrutiny, your reflection, your questioning. And this is why writing feels so difficult. Remember, or if you recall, when you've had an idea for something and you've written it down, you're like, now what? Well, it's difficult, and it should feel difficult. The difficulty is actually the exercise. And having been a writer in multiple ways and different mediums for more than 25 years, I started as a student journalist. I've created creative projects. I work as a communications strategist. I write. I've done copywriting. I've done journalism. I write poetry. I write for myself, and I know that. And I've said this so much, that the best writing does indeed happen in the edit, when you're having to refine and reflect and refine and reflect and iterate. And for sure, I know that right now because I'm so deep in my master's dissertation in systems thinking and my research, and I'm writing all of that up. And as you know, for any postgraduate dissertation effort, the writing is painful, but it's necessary because you refine, and there you have the cognitive friction. So the habit is not, and it shouldn't really be, sort of write and read when you can. This habit should be daily. It needs to be daily. Otherwise, we lose that cognitive friction, that muscle that I've been talking about. If a book is open on the table, or a page is written before the day starts and you leave it open. Sometimes I leave my journal or one of my notebooks open. I have multiple books scattered around the house. These are sort of small invitations. They're repeated. It's chosen friction. It's very intentional, especially at a time when everything else in your life is engineered to give you none, give you nothing at all. No chosen friction. Everything is easy. Everything is a scroll. So here is what that habit builds. Let's talk about synthesis. I talk about synthesis so much on Serena's playbook. I talk about analysis. I talk about our ability to reflect. When you read a long book, you are not just absorbing facts in a line. You are holding a whole structure in your head, where the argument started, where it's going, what the writers perhaps left out, and why. You're doing this without being told to do it. Your brain reconstructs an idea because reading, if done properly, demands you to do this thinking. This is a very different skill from watching a summary or a synopsis. A summary will hand you someone else's idea, that sort of abstract shape that I was talking about. It hands you the conclusion already, that kind of framework. It's pre-built, pre-designed, and there's absolutely no assembly required from you at all. You don't have to do any of the work, so you lose nothing. But once you care, you're like, yes, I care about this, so I am losing something. And you lose that muscle that builds these next frameworks, shapes, ideas for yourself. So synthesis is what lets you take, for instance, 5 sources that disagree with each other and build a position that is actually yours, or build an understanding that is your own. It's your own synthesis. And that's why I'm writing a book also in the final stages of publishing my book called Many Things at Once. Not 2 things can be true at once, not multiple truths at once, many things at once, many ideas, perspectives at once, to encourage us to do this synthesis. So when you take these 5 sources that disagree with each other and they hopefully invites you to build a position of your own, analysis is what then lets you take that one source and find a seam, a thread. You can also then identify if an argument is weak. Both synthesis, analysis, I mean, it comes from this same repeated act, holding a text in your head longer than is comfortable, because when you're in that discomfort, that's when you get that cognitive friction. Let's talk about decision making. This is, unfortunately, I think, where we suffer the most. Take that skill that I've just been talking about and actually use it where it actually matters in a practical, everyday way. Your decisions, a post-literate mind, which is what this article talks about in The Atlantic, it outsources the verdict. It outsources that sort of hard decision, that hard take that you find difficult. It asks instead a feed or a clip or a chat bot what something means and what you should do about it. This answer then arrives in a very fast food, Deliveroo, Uber Eats, whatever kind of way, but it might be even confident and finished, and actually it gives you a nice sort of neat, tied with a bow kind of judgment. But it's not. It's someone else's judgment, and you are claiming it as your own, as if you've done the work yourself. Now, good decisions, the kind that actually hold up in high pressure situations, they come from a mind that has actually practiced weighing the different sort of incomplete information and living with the discomfort of not actually knowing yet, of sort of uncertainty. I talk about this in my book, Many Things at Once, how the process of adoption through the UK foster care system not only had me, gosh, this is so long now, nearly 15 years ago, but it had me having to consider all these uncertain moving parts and stakeholders in a very complex web, all for probably the most complex and important relationship, and that is a bonding in a very significant way with a vulnerable infant. And so having to do that work, that practice, when you're having to weigh all these different uncertain and incomplete bits of information, and dealing with the unknowing, the uncertainty of it, that practice is similar to reading. That practice is writing your way through a problem before you know for sure, before you act on it. And if you skip this practice, this very critical practice that allows you to deal with complexity, um, and then you make a decision, that's lazy. It's not even your decision. And it could be too late for you to remedy a mistake of that sort. Let's talk about creativity. I've been talking about creativity and the creative process for so long, especially since 2015, more than 10 years ago, when I first started a channel called Life Vocabulary. Now, creativity takes the same hit, unfortunately, from another direction: AI. I've talked about this so much on this channel, and I've talked about the creative process with so many creatives, writers, producers for so long, especially on Life Vocabulary. And AI can now produce prose that reads as very clean, very competent, even very pleasant, convincing. Okay. But studies have actually shown people, even trained writers, sometimes prefer, unfortunately, the machine sentence to a human one. I don't, but unfortunately. Um, but we know that something super clean and clinical is not the same as original or emotional. A polished paragraph with something repeated, I mean, it's not new. It doesn't give you anything new, and it doesn't give you anything new in a new way with an original voice, because creativity requires all of that kind of rough starting, false starts even, that bad draft, that bad take, the sentence that you throw out, all the kind of trimming that you do. And that mess is actually not a flaw with the creative process. It's actually the magic within it. It is the process. And I've been talking about the creative process for so long. If you recall from my music journalism days and all the conversations I've had with producers, rappers, lyricists, singers, creatives, if you skip that step, if you let a tool skip you past that very important flawed process, that mess, you will produce perhaps more content, but it won't be yours. It won't be yours. Let's talk about critical thinking and media literacy, something that I've been talking about a lot, especially since I started my commentary channel. And this is where I think critical thinking and media literacy actually stop being separate skills. They stop being separate issues or things that we should be very sort of concerned with. It's actually one skill, and we should be practicing it daily. A feed, any news feed, social media feed, especially if you're a creator and you're creating political content, commentary, and actually my dissertation research is all about this. A feed is built to reward the take that actually can move fastest in terms of engagement, and it can provoke the hardest. It can be very negative, actually, because the most negative stuff, especially within politics, the more right you are, the more engagement you get. Now, nuanced actually does not travel well. We know this, and we know that if nuance doesn't travel well at that speed, then nuance will completely get cut again and again and again until what is basically left is something highly inaccurate. It is loud and wrong. A reader who has definitely spent a long time, um, I would say years, holding complicated arguments, different perspectives in their head, has a very natural resistance to this. You build that through cognitive friction, you build that critical thinking media literate muscle, that digital literate muscle. And so that person who has done the reading, they'll notice when a story has actually been very much sanded down from what it should be originally in terms of its truth or objectivity or balanced argument. And that person will then ask, well, hang on a second, what's been left out here? There's something missing from the picture here. So that is not a passive skill. You unfortunately cannot get that from scrolling. You've got to start to scroll more carefully. You've got to train yourself. It comes from there's very sort of similar process that synthesis comes from. The time that you spend with very long and difficult and sometimes disagreeable texts. Let's talk about politics and voting. This brings us to something I think larger than any of us, and it's about how we are all governed. Societies that read tend to reward people who can perhaps build an argument and defend it under scrutiny. If you love watching debates, and I do, you'll notice this. Societies that stop reading, unfortunately, tend to reward people who look right and sound confident, regardless of whether the argument actually underneath is correct, whether their argument or their position can even hold up. So, this is not, unfortunately, partisan observation. It shows up across the political spectrum, across the political aisle, wherever the depth stops being required and performance is just enough. The rage baiting that politicians do now, the constant rage baiting. So, voting well, voting in a smart way is an act of synthesis and, may I say, also resistance. It requires holding a candidate's record, their promises, the gap between what they say and what they do, and this all is held within your head at the same time, again, which is why I'm writing many things at once, long enough for you to actually perform a correct judgment that is yours and not being given to you by a chatbot. A citizen who has practiced this in a book will practice it at the ballot box, and that's a bar. You practice reading from a book, you practice writing, you'll do the same thing at a ballot box. You'll be a critical person. You'll be able to make a better, much more sound decision. A citizen who only has ever taken some pre-designed, pre-decided verdict will basically take the pre-built verdict there at the ballot box too. Let's talk about business. And if none of that moves you that I've mentioned, let's consider your business. Every market eventually rewards the operator who saw something that the others have perhaps not. Perhapsly? That should be a word. In business, a market will reward an operator who saw something that perhaps others will miss. And that kind of insight does not actually come from the same things everyone is reading, like the same headlines, the same news feed. It comes from going a layer deeper and then another layer deeper than perhaps your competitors are even willing to go, and building a positive, perhaps community sort of relationship with your community and your audience. They can trust you for that, and you'll build a position from perhaps material that no one else will touch. This is a reading advantage as well before it is anything else. Brands, founders who last are usually the ones who can explain, offer you analysis, and they can do so in their own words, and they can do it without script. And they'll also be able to explain why they made the call that they made, and not in a summary way, not using a deck that someone else has built for them. With their own reasoning, they'll be able to do it on the page and write about it. They'll be able to talk about it on a podcast, and they can defend their position when someone pushes back. They can even explain it and show you their calculation. That is what writing does for a business mind. It enforces the sort of reasoning into the open. You get that transparency in the open where its weaknesses can actually be found as well. And then from a reputational management perspective, you've also covered your back. You've done that work. And I've spoken about that. And I've got my 5 days of PR course, or 21-day digital communications course as well, all available on Serena's Playbook. So this is what I'm asking of you, and I'm asking of myself. Read something today that takes real effort. Get on Google Scholar. Get on something. You've got to also write something. Absolutely write something today, even if it's very brief, that you actually had to think about how to produce, and then do it again tomorrow. Do it again tomorrow. The world will keep building tools that remove this need from us, that will challenge our cognitive friction, that will make this muscle of ours atrophy. So we have to continue to push back use the tools where they can earn some kind of benefit in our lives, and then refuse them, absolutely refuse them when they are trying to do the thinking for us. So, this friction that I've been talking about, this cognitive friction that so many are talking about, this is the whole point. It's not an obstacle for us, it's actually what makes us so superhuman. It's been wonderful to have your time and attention for this long. 20 minutes, you managed it. I hope you weren't multitasking. If you if you were, fair, it's fine, it's calm. I do welcome your comments, likes, shares. Click that notification bell. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. I'm here with more than 25 years experience now in comms and media. I'm a chartered public relations practitioner. I am in the final weeks of my master's in science in systems thinking, and I have a lot more to offer you here, as well as all my other channels where I provide commentary as well as strategic thinking content. It's wonderful to have your ear, your eyes, your attention, and I will see you in the next one, hopefully after you've read something challenging and written something that wasn't so easy.